The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad countless. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So, good morning. We just had a period of meditation. A number of you are gathered here for the week-long retreat with Reverend Enya on the Lankavatara Sutra. I'm going to start on a new series of talks today. I'm going to talk about a different scripture. I'm going to talk about the scripture of great wisdom and about Prajnaparamita. Okay. Prajnaparamita is considered the mother of all the Buddhas. Okay, and this is a depiction of her over here on this pillar. I hope you can all see it. If not, drop by before you go. It's a famous statue from the island of Java in Indonesia. The scripture of great wisdom, for those of you who are not familiar with our practice, is the central scripture of the Zen tradition, meditation tradition, and we chant it every morning, both in all of our temples. As monks, that's a part of our practice. Even if we don't get to the Buddha Hall, we try to chant the scripture in our room. I meant to introduce myself. I know most of you, but for some of you who may not know who I am, and if you're following this up on YouTube, I'm Reverend Oswin. I'm one of our Master Ji's disciples. I was ordained in the mid-'80s. I'm a senior monk here at the monastery. So I want to start explaining what these talks are not going to be. That's very Zen, I suppose. Okay. They're not going to follow any kind of regular progression. Okay, each one hopefully will just stand alone by itself. I sometimes talk about non-linear thinking. Okay. And each talk in itself is going to be a non-linear talk. Okay, and what I mean by that is not going to follow, the essay form that many of us learned in junior high school, where you have an introduction, 3 points, and a summary. Okay, I think of these more as explorations. Okay, it's more like we're on a ship in the middle of the ocean, and we're going to go visit all these points along the shoreline. Okay, there'll be some that are really big, like the Gulf of Mexico, the North Sea, the Indian Ocean. Some will be incredibly dramatic, like the fords in Scandinavia or northern Canada, or Alaska. Some are going to be very complex, like the deltas of the Mississippi or the Nile. Some will be warm, sunny beaches like Southern California or the Mediterranean. Some are going to be very cold, perhaps, like the Arctic Sea, and we may risk bumping into some icebergs in some of the things we talk about. Some are just going to be very small forays. You may have to get in one of our, I think it's called a longboat, and sail out into one of these little coves or inlets and explore it. We just make a brief trip. But we're always going to try to come back to the middle of the ocean. Okay? And in in Buddhism, the ocean is considered a metaphor for meditation. Okay. And what I hope to do is, in all of these, connect up what I'm saying with meditation. Okay. I'm not a scholar, an academic. I probably was one in a few past life or earlier in this life, but I've tried to let all that go, and hopefully what I present will come from the place of meditation and not an academic study. The script's great wisdom is sometimes called the Heart Sutra. Okay, it's because there's what they call the Great Wisdom Sutras. It's a whole collection of sutras. Like there's 16 different sutras included. One of them is the Diamond Sutra. And they range in size from the letter A to 100,000 lines. Okay. But the Heart Sutra, the script's great wisdom, is considered to be the heart, the distillation of all this vast teaching. And one of the talks will be about that, how these scriptures interrelate. This is a massive subject. I sometimes feel it's almost kind of preposterous for me to try to undertake it. Okay, I think there's been over 100 commentaries written on this scripture. All the kind of the great masters of our day have written books about it. The Dalai Lama, Shen Thich Nhat Hanh, Xing Yun wrote a wonderful book on the Diamond Sutra. Most of those I haven't read. Okay, maybe I will, as we go along and learn something myself and can present that if I find it useful. The other thing I'm going to try to do is to work in some of the teachings that Rev. Master Jiu gave us that they may not be recorded someplace. You may not find them in a book. She taught in a number of different ways. Sometimes she would talk on Sunday after a ceremony like this. For a while in the summer, she would do continuing education courses down in the San Francisco Bay Area, connected with the University of California. A number of people, connect with her and our order and the Abbey that way. She was very kaleidoscopic in how she presented the Dharma. Sometimes she taught in a very formal way. The monks would be sitting in meditation, and she would usually teach on chapters from the Shobo Genzo, great Master Dogen's masterwork, or the Dinko Roku by great Master Keizan. And again, the monks are sitting in meditation, you're listening, and it's the same. Why those of you who are here for this week-long retreat, it's the same format. You're sitting in meditation, and you're listening to the Dharma. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Reverend Master Jiu also taught a lot on a one-to-one basis, just interaction with individual monks. It was considered a great opportunity to be asked to help in her house, on a day-to-day basis. There would be, someone was cooking, someone was helping with her writing letters, someone else was, fixing the stove or the sink, or, she usually had, 5 or 6 different monks that were helping her with all sorts of different projects, and to be able to work with her in that way was considered, as I said, a great opportunity, because you got kind of that one-on-one interaction with her. She once said, any time you teach more than one person at a time, you risk misunderstanding. Okay? So if you're a one-on-one, there's more of a chance that she was going to tailor the teaching to you in this moment and address what we sometimes call the spiritual koan. Okay, the koan or spiritual question of daily life. Okay. That doesn't mean that she was asking us something outside of the events of daily life. Okay, if you read the koan stories, often they're describing just something that happened in daily life, and they kind of get frozen in time and passed on. We lose the context. Okay. So that was another way she taught. Now, I was ordained in the mid-'80s. This was about halfway through her time of being the abbess here. And about that time, her health started failing. So I didn't have a lot of personal interaction with her myself. I never felt shortchanged, okay? She was always the abbess, she was always my master. But a lot of the direct teaching I got from her senior disciples. That was just the way it kind of worked for my kind of generation of monks. So some of the things I will offer are things that I may not have learned directly from her. Okay, but I'm going to try to not say anything that was outside of what she taught. Okay, there's something that happens when you study and teach with a master. I think it has to do with the transmission, kind of the commitment to carrying on the lineage. And it's like you develop this filter that you can kind of look at almost any Buddhist teaching and kind of find something in it that fits in with what we do. Not everything, but often there may be even just one thing. Some of us really are inspired by the Theravadan forest monks. Okay, I myself, I really like Tibetan Buddhist teaching. I have no clue as to the practice. Okay, I don't understand that. I have never tried, but I find the teachings really helpful. There's Chinese Pure Land or Chinese Chan. There's just a whole range of other different Buddhist traditions, and I used to read a lot, so some of what I say is going to be some of that filtering from maybe from other traditions. Okay, but again, I'm going to try to make sure that what I say is in accord with what Reverend Master Jiu passed on to us. And I think every one of us are direct disciples or grand disciples. Now she has great grand disciples. There's something in common that we share, so that anytime you come here, anytime you go to another temple of our order, there's something that feels familiar. There's something you can feel at home there. You can trust that the teaching and the practice is going to be in accord with what she tried to pass on in our what's called lineage, what she learned in Japan, but also what she learned in Malaysia from Chinese Buddhism from her ordination master. Another way that Master Jiu taught, and this is where I may have something that hasn't been written down, recorded, maybe somebody else has, but she'd often just, call all the monks together and we'd have tea. And, that's a British, I think, because she was from England, we called it tea, and we just actually had tea. And she would just talk, and she'd cover all sorts of things, current events, what was going on in the monastery, a new rule, a new ceremony, what was going on, what she saw was going on in the world of religion, world of Buddhism. There were sometimes she would just remember things from when she was training in Japan. When she left, it was only when she left that she was actually given the ceremonial book. Okay. These are the sorts of things I'm going to try to work into these talks. Most of what we initially had as our liturgy, if I'm not mistaken, was she wrote it from memory. Okay. And when she left, they gave her the ceremonial book, which is, of course, in Japanese Chinese, and it wasn't until Reverend Master Hubert came along who could translate that into what we call the monastic office, that we got some of the other ceremonies that she may not have seen, okay, or been a part of. So she would just talk about all kinds of things, and it was also an opportunity for us to ask questions. Okay. So if I'm bringing in things that seem to be tangential, I'm not losing my marbles, okay? I'm not getting, so old I can't stay on topic, okay? These digressions often are intentional. Sometimes they rise spontaneously. A lot of them I thought about. So if you can just bear with me, go with me on this ship as we just explore these different shorelines. Now, I want to say just a little something about Dharma talks. The word Dharma talk isn't really quite the right word, because it sounds like I'm talking and you folks are listening. It's actually a conversation going on, okay? The Dharma's coming out of me, and hopefully it comes from my heart, the heart of meditation. And, I'm listening to each of you. I'm trying to sense, intuit what would be most helpful for those of you who are here today. Okay. Even if you do the same talk with the same notes, it never comes out the same way because your audience is different. And so what I'm trying to convey, it's not information. Okay. It's something about practice that might help you. And, I think the Reverend Master G said, again, it's one of those things that gets kind of blurred, but, if you can, if only one person understands one thing, you're doing pretty good. Okay? It may be Dogen that said this, and I'm not very good on quotes, and but I think it was Dogen said that when you listen to a Dharma talk, it's like you're trying to pour water from one bowl into another. Okay? And again, it's not informational. I can remember Master Ji, she would sometimes lecture on the Shobogenzo, and have sat there in meditation and you've listened, and those of you who are familiar with Dogen's Jobogenzo, it's often quite profound. And then afterwards, I can remember someone coming up to me and say, well, what did she talk about? And I had to say, I have no idea. I really have no idea. But the teaching went into my heart, okay, and it ripened over time. Maybe it's still ripened, okay. So we're trying to listen with something deeper than our intellectual mind. One of the little stories, I think this is in Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, but there's a story of a professor who went to visit a Zen master. And the professor was very much full of himself and asking all these questions and, trying, full of his own opinions and ideas. And finally, that master was able to interject, well, would you like some tea? Okay. And so the professor said, well, I guess so. And so the Zen master gave the professor the cup, and then proceeded to pour the tea into the professor's cup. Okay. And the Zen master just kept pouring, and the tea just started overflowing of the cup. And the professor said, what are you doing? What are you doing? You can't fit in anymore in this cup. And the master said, well, unless you open your mind, I can't get anything into you. You're so full of your own opinions and ideas and kind of your intellectual viewpoint that you're not open to hearing what I have to say. Okay. So if you can, open your heart, just try to go with me as we do these explorations. Let me think now. The other thing, I'll talk a little bit about the scriptural wisdom. We'll talk more about it, but there's a reason why we chant that every day, because it's intimately connected with our meditation practice. Okay. The Sanskrit for the great wisdom is Prajnaparamita. Okay. Prajna means wisdom. Okay. And it's through meditation that we develop wisdom. Okay. It's Reverend Hubert translated Prajna as wise discernment. Okay, it's learning to see. Okay, it's not intellectual knowledge. It's learning to see with what the Buddha sometimes called right view. It's the first step of the Eightfold Path. It's learning to see how things really are, and we use the word shunyata for that, which sometimes has been often translated as emptiness. Okay. Where Master Jiyu, in studying with her teachers in Japan, felt that wasn't, that could be easily misunderstood. So they come up with using the word pure. Okay. And in the script's great wisdom, it talks about, form is pure, so it's consciousness and will and sensation and so forth. A lot of the traditional translations say empty. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. But we use the word pure there. But the scripture in our translation said it's void, unstained, impure. Okay. It's not about, when we talk about pure, it's not empty. Where Master Jiyu said it's the fullest emptiness you'll ever know. Okay, so it's not kind of this vacuous, sensing, unthinking state. Okay, she taught us, it's the brain's job to think. And when you sit down to meditation, you're not trying to stop the brain. You're not trying to stop the mind. You're just trying not to be run around by it and try to touch something deeper. Okay? And it takes time. It takes practice. That's why we call it training or call it practice. But it's interesting. We call it practice, and it only really works if you do it regularly. And so it's kind of like practicing the piano. If you want to play, Beethoven concerto, you've got to practice a bit, probably a lot unless you're one of these musical geniuses like Mozart or somebody who can just sit down and play. But it's interesting in that it never becomes a performance. Okay? We're not doing it for anybody else. We're not trying to show how good we are. We're not trying to, it's not a recital. It's just another day of practice. Okay? And there's, again, the script's great wisdom comes into this with the kind of the final lines about going on beyond, and always going on beyond, always becoming Buddha. Okay, Master Jiu in War of the Tigris, there's 2 volumes of that, 1 and 2, and I can't remember which volume this is in, but she said, well, I think it's in 2, where she taught, it's it's roughly a transcript of her talks that she did, some of the talks she did in the Shobo Ginzo, and there's one on something like practicing Buddha. And she says, well, actually, if you were going to translate that more accurately, she said it would be going on beyond, always going on beyond, always practicing Buddha. She didn't translate that way. She felt people wouldn't get it. Okay, but that's what she pointed to, is that we're always practicing like Buddha. We're always practicing to become Buddha. All right. What the Buddhas discovered is something we can all discover. Okay, it wasn't his creation. Even he said, I'm not teaching anything new. Okay? I've just kind of rediscovered these eternal truths, and I'm passing them on. And in each generation, we try to continue that. So when we practice meditation, we're developing prajna, wise discernment. Some of the other things that I will touch on, we'll talk about the script's great wisdom. We'll talk a lot about one version of the Great Wisdom Sutras. It's one that's in the 8,000 lines. They think that might have been the original sutra, and what they did was they, people were practicing, and so they kind of shortened it and they lengthened it, and those scripts, they did it because they were done for chanting. Okay, and so you weren't trying to learn something more about great wisdom. You were trying to identify with great wisdom and become great wisdom. And so there's a lot of repetition. It's like, the scripture, 8,000 lines, there's all these similes. Every other verse is a simile. Okay, the Buddha is saying it's like this, it's like this, and it's like that. It goes on. So we'll look at that scripture in particular. That scripture also emphasizes what we call the bodhisattva vow. Right? That's what the Dalai Lama calls the altruistic wish. Is the wish to benefit all beings. Okay? And that's essentially what paramita means. Okay? Right? We've got prajna is the wisdom, and paramita is translate roughly as going to the other shore. Okay? The other shore being nirvana. But we don't want to just go by ourselves. We're actually trying to ferry or cross over all beings. And that's why our tradition is part of the larger branch of Buddhism called Mahayana. Mahayana means great, and yana means wheel or vessel or course, or we'll talk about that. So, but it's within that a version of the 8,000 lines that again and again, and this is what a bodhisattva does. A bodhisattva with wisdom, this is how they practice. They also practice with compassion. Okay? Paramita, always wishing to cross over other beings. And wisdom is intimately connected with that. It's not like wisdom and compassion are two different things. You join them together. Okay, so you get prajna, paramita, the wisdom that crosses beings over to the other shore. And the paramitas are, they're specifically developed by the bodhisattva. Okay, the being who, bodhi means enlightenment, sattva means being. And so the bodhisattva is one who's dedicated to enlightenment, but it's enlightenment for the benefit of all. It's just not one's personal understanding. Now, again, coming back to this depiction, this is how Prajnaparamita was depicted. Okay, you can view her. It's she. It's definitely a she. Okay, and it's interesting. We usually think of Zen as very austere and even masculine and tough and so forth, but our primary scripture is about a feminine. It's portrayed in a feminine form. Think about that. That's something to consider. Okay. So she's Prajna Paramita, and she can represent wisdom in the same way that Kanzeon over here, on this other shrine, represents compassion. Okay, and I'll spend at least one talk talking more about that. The other, as I said, she's considered the mother of all the Buddhas. Okay, and I'll talk about that. There's a whole book called Mother of the Buddhas. Okay, we'll talk about that some. We'll delve into it. The other thing I'll just mention, because all these things kind of connect together, and I'm one who really likes to see connections. Maybe not everybody gets as excited about that as I do, but if you look up here on the main altar, there's this ornate box. Have you ever wondered what's in that box? Okay, well, that box contains some version of the Great Wisdom Sutras. I don't know which version. If we asked Burmaster Koten, who was, our walking Buddhist encyclopedia, he could probably tell you. Okay, but I don't know. But there's some version of it in there. So whenever we bow to the Buddha, we're also bound to the mother of the Buddhas. because that's what the scripture in that box represents. Okay? So all of these things, the title of the scripture, the image of Prajnaparamita, the scripture box on the altar, all of these things are linked up, all right? And they're all trying to bring us back to practice, okay? Trying to point us in the right way, helping us try to understand the reality with a capital R, but it's not some esoteric thing. It's right here in daily life, okay? And that's why in Zen or meditation, if you practice here, we put a lot of this on practice in daily life. We don't spend all day on our meditation cushions. If you come for a retreat, you probably meditate more than what we would ordinarily do in a day at the monastery. And that's real valuable. But even when you're on retreat, and this is true for the monks as when we're on retreat, someone still has to cook breakfast. Okay. Some of the monks still have to go in and prepare the meals. Okay? So we actually never get away from daily life practice. We sometimes call it working meditation, but I like to think of it more as everyday practice, because it's applying meditation to everything that you do. It's not just when you're working or when you have a work period in the schedule. It's how you walk up the cloister. It's how you brush your teeth. All these kind of mundane activities of life become part of practicing Buddha. Okay, they become a part of the development of prajna, of wisdom, and in learning to see in this way, it also awakens the heart of compassion. It's said in Mahayana Buddhism there's two pillars, and they're considered, compassion and wisdom. Okay. Wisdom without compassion can be very cold, intellectual. Okay. Compassion without wisdom can be over emotional. You can get into becoming a do-gooder, trying to be compassionate and helping the world. So you need both. You need compassion, you need wisdom. And I think for all of us, well, I don't know, I can just say it for myself, I guess. We're really trying to learn to balance those two things, okay? Sometimes we may err on one end or the other, but again, that's the usefulness of training with a Sangha, because we get kind of immediate feedback of how skillful we were and how we were combining for balancing compassion and wisdom. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. That's kind of where I'm trying to go with this. There's probably I only give, each of us only give these talks, 4 or 5 times a year. So you have to. There's a lot to practice with, I hope, in between. Something for you to carry with you in practice. The senior monks also, we do a Saturday afternoon talk and discussion occasionally, and what I'm thinking of is that when it's my turn to do that, I may open that up as an opportunity to ask questions about what I've talked about in these talks. These talks are on YouTube, so anyone can listen to them. If you want to refresh your mind, they're going to be there. But that might give an opportunity to have a more immediate exchange about the scripture and share, you share your understanding with me, you share your understanding with the other people who are there. Okay, so I'm going to end there. I hope that gives you where this voyage is going to try to take us. This is, I said, when I sometimes think about this, well, this is a little bit too ambitious. But that's what I'm going to try to do, and I appreciate any feedback people have that you can pass on to me. What's helpful? Where am I going? A little too intellectual or academic or peripheral. So I welcome any feedback. And thank you all for being here today. Those of you who live locally, those of you who have come to for the retreat, we're really glad to have you here. I really admire Reverend India for tackling the Lankavatra Sutra. It's a really hard one. Okay, and I'm really looking forward to her helping us with that. And I know, having just talked to her a little bit and knowing her, she's going to bring out again kind of how is this helpful to our practice. Okay, it's not about a scholarly explanation of the scripture. So I'm going to close. There's things the monks have to do to get ready for the retreat. May you all have a good day. Those of you who come for the retreat, have a good retreat. Those of you who live locally, I think you're welcome to come to any of the talks. And I think there's discussions in some of the afternoons. Please feel free to join us. And thank you for your practice. We sometimes think we come to the monastery to learn from the monks. Well, actually, we learn from you as well. It's a mutual learning, and we're just so glad to have you here. And may you all take care. Good day.